Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to go over an overview of development. So here are some terms to keep in mind. A zygote is when a sperm and an egg unite. So this is the first cell that is formed in the process of development. It's called a zygote. Fertilization is the process of an egg and sperm joining. Pregnancy is the development of offspring in the uterus, and development can be divided into two parts. You have the prenatal period, which begins with fertilization of an egg, so when the zygote is formed, and ends at birth. Postnatal period begins at birth and ends with death. Okay, so transportation of sex cells. Ovulation has to happen first before fertilization can take place. We talked about this in the reproductive system. Once ovulation takes place, the secondary oocyte is going to be released from the ovaries. It has to be caught by the fimbria of the fallopian tubes or the uterine tube, and fertilization needs to take place within the uterine tube. So there is a window for the process of fertilization to take place. Sperm cells also must travel upwards through the uterus and into the uterine tube to reach the secondary oocyte. There will be some enzymes and some molecules in semen that are going to help sperm cells travel to the oocyte, such as prostaglandins, and also prostaglandins will help with muscular contractions of the uterus and the uterine tube. So I go over this in my reproductive video. I'm not going to go over it again, but right here we could see the process of ovulation happening. This is the secondary oocyte that is going to be released, which must then be caught by the uterine tube, and that's where fertilization can take place. So in the process of ejaculation, as many as 200 million to 600 million sperm cells may be deposited in the vagina. However, only a few hundred will ever be able to reach the secondary oocyte. Remember that this happens by the cervix. Therefore, sperm cells have to travel up in the cervical canal, in the uterus, and into the uterine tube to reach the secondary oocyte. Sperm cells reach the uterine tube in about less than an hour after sexual intercourse. So a few hundred will reach the oocyte, but only one gets to fertilize the egg. Here is an electron micrograph of several hundred sperm cells reaching the secondary oocyte. Only one gets to fertilize it. However, occasionally you have two sperm cells entering the oocyte. If that happens, the zygote will have 3 sets of chromosomes. Usually in the process of development, that zygote won't make it very far. However, 1 in every few million will, and it will result in a fetus that has many different types of deformities due to three different sets of chromosomes. So when sperm cells invade the follicular cells of the oocyte, they do release an enzyme that is going to aid penetration of sperm head by digesting proteins that are going to be surrounding the oocyte. What will happen is that the head of the sperm will make it inside the egg. However, the middle section, which is filled with mitochondria, and the tail will stay outside. Remember that the head is what contains the DNA. So that is the part that will be entered into the oocyte. Once the sperm nucleus enters the oocyte, it will swell. This is where, at this point, the oocyte will quickly complete the process of meiosis. Remember that oocyte will not finish the process of meiosis unless it is going to be invaded by a sperm cell. So at this point, it will finish the process of meiosis, and then you have the two nuclei of the sperm cell and the egg joining to form one cell, which is the zygote. So keep in mind that the egg and the sperm each only have 23 chromosomes. They're haploid cells. They're not going to be diploid like other cells in your body. So once you have them join, 23 and 23, you will have a zygote that has 46 chromosomes. The prenatal period lasts about 38 weeks after conception, and it can be divided into three parts. You have the period where cleavage is happening, the embryonic stage, and the fetal stage. 30 hours after the zygote has been formed, it undergoes the process of mitosis. So this is how it will grow after fertilization, by the process of mitosis and not meiosis. These cells will continue to divide and give rise to new cells. Because there isn't much time for these cells to grow and they're dividing so rapidly, as they divide, they become smaller and smaller because there isn't time for them to grow. These cells that are forming are called blastomeres. The trip to the uterus takes about 3 days. So this structure is going to be growing and dividing in the uterine tube for about 3 days, and the division will continue. So eventually, it will become a hollow ball called, this is a misspelling right here, a blastocyst, and drops into the endometrium. At about day 6, the blastocyst begins to attach to the uterine lining, and it's going to be completely buried into the uterine lining, and this process is going to be called implantation. So right here in this diagram, we could see the process of ovulation happening. Here is the secondary oocyte. You could see a sperm cell right here. It's going to invade this oocyte. So now you have a fertilized egg, a zygote over here. And after about day 1, the cleavage process is happening. So this cell is going to divide and become 2, and then 4, and it's going to continue until it becomes this structure over here, filled with different cells, different number of cells, called the morula. And eventually, as it divides, it's going to become this hollow ball called the blastocyst. And the blastocyst will eventually get implanted into the uterine wall. And this is the process of implantation. Here's another diagram. Here's the zygote. We could see the process of cleavage happening here. Here is the blastula, the hollow ball. And the blastula eventually becomes this structure right here called the gastrula. It folds in on itself to form different layers that are going to be important for development of the embryo. We should keep in mind what a placenta is. This is going to be a vascular structure. Right here you can see the placenta. And this is formed by cells surrounding the embryo and cells of the endometrium. This is the site of nutrient, gas, and waste exchange between the mother's blood and the embryo's blood. Okay, embryonic stage is from the second week after conception or the zygote forming to week 8 of prenatal development. This is when the placenta will be formed and the main internal organs will appear. The fetal stage starts after week 8, and it goes on until birth. And this is when body proportions are going to change. So at the beginning of the stage, the fetus has a very large head, a very small body, small limbs, and gradually as this stage moves forward, the fetus will begin to look more and more like a child. The neonatal period is from birth to the end of the first 4 weeks after birth. There are a lot of actually physiological changes happening here in newborns because the baby is learning to do things for itself, such as respiration, digestion of nutrients, excretion of waste, and regulation of body temperature. These are all things that the mother's body did for the baby, so now the baby is beginning to learn to do it for him or herself. The first breath is the most critical one, so that's going to be what's most important. This is going to be a very forceful inhalation because when the baby comes out, his or her lungs are going to be collapsed. So there's going to be a lot of force in this first breath to open up the lungs. What stimulates this first breath in newborns is increased concentration of carbon dioxide, decrease of pH, low oxygen concentration, and drop in body temperature. These will take place when the baby is in the process of moving out of the mother's body. And also mechanical stimulation before and after birth will also trigger the baby to take its first breath. Okay, that wraps it up for development.